You've flown dozens of times, maybe even hundreds. But what if I told you there's a hidden code on your boarding pass that could mean you've just been flagged for intense government screening, and most people have no idea it's there? What if the smooth-looking seats, the cabin chimes, and even the meals served thousands of feet in the air were part of a carefully controlled system, designed not just for comfort, but for control? Flying isn't just transportation. It's a high-stakes operation filled with secrets most passengers never even think to question. From locked compartments you didn't know existed to the real reason pilots eat different meals. This is the side of air travel the airlines won't tell you about. Buckle up, because what you're about to learn could completely change the way you see your next flight. Take a closer look at your boarding pass. Not the gate number or the departure time. Look for 3 tiny letters that most people overlook. SSS. If those letters are printed anywhere on your pass, you've just been marked for something that feels routine until it isn't. It stands for Secondary Security Screening Selection, and it means you're about to have a very different airport experience than everyone else. You might be pulled aside after scanning your ticket. Your carry-on could be emptied out piece by piece. You may even be taken to a separate area and searched more thoroughly, all while the other passengers breeze past you to their gate. But how does someone end up on that list? That's the part they rarely explain. Sometimes it's because you booked a one-way flight. Sometimes it's because you paid in cash. And sometimes it's for no clear reason at all. People have been flagged for having too many flight changes, buying tickets at the last minute, or even just because a random algorithm picked them out of the crowd. You'll never be told exactly why. That's part of what makes the whole process so unnerving. It's deliberately vague. Still, that little code on your pass? It's more than just a few letters. It's a digital signal that says, this person gets the extra treatment. And it can follow you. Travelers have reported getting flagged on multiple trips after that first SSS appearance, even if nothing suspicious ever happened. Whether it's random or not, it sticks. But the boarding pass has other secrets too. Some that could seriously mess up your plans if you're not careful. And while you're still holding that seemingly harmless piece of paper, there's another overlooked danger, one that doesn't. Involves security lines, but something much more personal. Your data. That crumpled boarding pass you're tempted to toss in the nearest trash can, it holds more than your seat number. Your full name, frequent flyer number, and even your upcoming travel plans are embedded in that code. With just a few clicks, someone could scan it, access your airline account, and even cancel or change your future flights without you knowing until it's too late. In some cases, people have found their reward miles stolen or their travel history exposed, all because they left a paper trail behind. The safest thing you can do with a boarding pass? Take it home and shred it. Never leave it behind on the seat or in the seat pocket. But while airlines warn you about carry-on weight and tray tables, they don't exactly advertise how vulnerable that little slip of paper makes you. Still, that's only scratching the surface of what airlines keep under wraps. Ever notice how nearly every commercial airplane has seats upholstered in blue fabric? It's not a branding choice or a coincidence. It's by design. Blue has been scientifically shown to have a calming effect on people, especially in high-stress environments. And let's face it, being packed in a metal tube thousands of feet above the ground can trigger more than a little anxiety. The blue tones help ease that tension, encouraging relaxation without passengers even realizing it. But there's a more practical reason too. Dark blue fabrics are incredible at hiding stains, dirt, and signs of wear, all of which accumulate quickly when hundreds of people cycle through those cabins every day. The color wasn't chosen for style. It was chosen because it's efficient, psychologically and logistically. Because when you're crammed next to strangers and turbulence starts to kick in, the last thing the airline wants is for you to notice how grimy your seat really is. Speaking of turbulence, most passengers grip their armrests the second the cabin starts to shake. It's instinct. The sudden dips and jolts feel like the plane is falling out of the sky. But here's the truth that even seasoned travelers don't always know. Turbulence almost never poses a serious threat. In fact, pilots barely flinch when it happens. They know the aircraft might drop just a few feet. It feels dramatic, but it's completely within safety margins. What actually worries them isn't the bumps. It's what happens when the air pushes up. Updrafts are a whole different beast. These invisible vertical currents, often lurking inside storm systems, can unexpectedly shove a plane higher into the sky, sometimes into dangerously thin air where engines and instruments are less effective. And here's the scary part. While turbulence is usually predicted and monitored, strong updrafts, especially at night, can appear without warning. It's one of the few scenarios that can rattle even the most experienced pilots. So while passengers are panicking over a minor shake, the real threat is the invisible force that pushes a plane upward, not downward. Still, pilots are trained for it, and they're not alone in the cockpit when things get tense. Sometimes the plane itself talks back. If another aircraft comes within 10 miles of yours, an automated voice system in the cockpit repeats a chilling phrase over and over. Traffic, traffic. It's not a glitch. It's a real-time warning system that gives pilots specific instructions to avoid collisions. The voice will even override the pilot's own judgment if needed. It's a robotic co-pilot designed to make split-second decisions when every second counts. But aircraft aren't just built to dodge traffic or storms. They're designed to survive worst-case scenarios, like an engine failure during takeoff. Most people assume that if an engine dies, the plane is doomed. But modern commercial jets can not only fly, they can take off, climb, and even land with just one functioning engine. And if, in the rarest of cases, both engines go out, the aircraft doesn't just plummet. Pilots can still glide the plane for up to 20 minutes, long enough to find a safe place to land. It's not luck, it's engineering, and it's all happening silently, behind the scenes, while passengers sip coffee and scroll through in-flight movies. ChatGPT said, and while you're fixated on what the plane is doing mid-air, there's a decision you make before you even sit down that can quietly shape your entire flight. When you board, most people rush to be first in line, thinking they'll beat the crowd, get settled, and maybe claim overhead bin space before it's gone. But frequent flyers, the ones who know the system inside and out, often do the exact opposite. They wait. They board last. Why? Because once your seat is assigned, there's no need to cram yourself into a slow-moving line or stand in the jetway for 15 minutes while others wrestle with luggage and jackets. Boarding last means you spend less time boxed into a narrow seat, breathing recycled air, and it makes the whole process feel smoother. But there's a catch, and it's one that could leave you regretting that late entrance. Overhead, bin space fills up fast, especially on full flights. If you're carrying a bulky bag and you wait too long, you might be forced to stash it far from your seat, or worse, gate check it. That means handing it over to the crew, waiting at baggage claim, and hoping it doesn't end up in a different city than you. So it's a gamble. Board early and get the bin space, or board late and skip the chaos. Either way, once you're seated and the doors are closed, you're not just a passenger anymore. You're part of a highly choreographed system that kicks into gear from the moment the wheels leave the ground. And part of that system? Bathroom doors that aren't as private as they seem. Ever notice the little metal plate that says lavatory? It's not just decorative. Behind it is a hidden mechanism that allows flight attendants to unlock the bathroom door, even from the outside. With just a lift and a twist, they can pop the lock open, regardless of who's inside. It's a safety feature, meant for emergencies, but most passengers have no idea it even exists. It's one of many quiet controls built into the plane, invisible until suddenly they matter. And while you're busy thinking no one's watching, someone always is, because once you're sealed inside a flying tube, nothing is left to chance. But even with all those hidden systems in place, there's one thing no airline can fully control: your body. Ever wonder why airplane food tastes so off? It's not the recipe, and it's not because it was reheated. It's you. At 35,000 feet, the air pressure in the cabin actually dulls your sense of taste. Studies show your ability to detect sweet and salty flavors drops by as much as 30%. That's why even the blandest airplane meal is loaded with extra salt, spices, and seasonings. They're trying to compensate for the fact that your mouth is basically working at half power. But there's a strange trick that might actually make your meal taste better: noise-canceling headphones. It turns out that reducing the roar of the engines can sharpen your sense of taste just enough to notice a difference. Less background noise, more flavor. Weird, right? Now, here's something even stranger. Ever notice that pilots and co-pilots don't eat the same meal? That's not personal preference. It's protocol. Airlines require pilots to eat different dishes, prepared separately. It's a safety measure in case one of the meals is contaminated. If something goes wrong and one pilot gets sick, the other is still in top shape to land the plane. And if they insist on eating the same thing, they do it hours apart, just in case one dish turns out to be a ticking time bomb. You're trusting these people with your life, so their lunch isn't just lunch, it's a part of the airline's emergency planning. That's how many layers of precaution are baked into every flight, down to the snacks. But if you're worried about safety, here's something that should concern you even more than turbulence or in-flight meals: the things you touch. Because the dirtiest part of the airplane, it's not the bathroom. It's the place where your head rests and your hands linger. Studies have found that seat belts, tray tables, seat pockets, and headrests are covered in bacteria, far more than the toilet flush button. A third of seat belts tested contained traces of mold and yeast. Tray tables, often wiped down with the same cloth used across rows, and headrests, the one place you might lean your face against for a nap, are rarely disinfected between flights. Flight attendants are working on tight turnarounds, and full sanitation just isn't possible. So if you're not wiping down your space before settling in, you're sharing more than just armrests with the last passenger. And while you're getting cozy in that surprisingly filthy seat, listening for the usual "please fasten your seatbelt" announcement, you might hear a series of dings that sound routine, but they're anything but random. Each chime inside the cabin has a specific meaning. A single ding shortly after takeoff usually means the landing gear has successfully retracted, but hear 3 chimes in quick succession? That's a different story. That's the crew's signal that something needs urgent attention. And if you catch a high-low chime, like 2 notes played back to back, it means the crew is being summoned to a specific area of the plane, but the one that should really make you sit up? 3 low chimes in a row. That's the turbulence alert. It means the flight attendants need to lock up the meal carts, secure the cabin, and buckle up themselves because serious movement is coming. By the time you hear that one, your tray should already be stowed. Still, if you're trying to avoid getting tossed around in your seat, there's a smarter way to fly that most people don't think about: where you sit. The middle of the plane, right over the wings, is the most stable spot during turbulence. It's the plane's center of gravity and flex point, meaning you'll feel less of the vertical bounce that hits the nose and tail. The front might get you off the plane faster, and the back might be closer to the bathroom, but if you hate that stomach drop feeling, the middle is your best bet. Ironically, the seats most people avoid, the ones above the wings with limited views, are actually the smoothest ride in the sky. And speaking of things most passengers don't know, have you ever wondered what happens when the captain says they're finishing up paperwork? It's not someone filling out forms in a clipboard while sipping coffee. That's usually code for reviewing the flight itinerary, signing off on fuel checks, or waiting on the ground crew to complete and deliver the official flight log. That log tracks everything from your route to maintenance clearances. Until that log is in the pilot's hands, you're not going anywhere. It's a formality, but also a final safety checkpoint before takeoff. Everything has to be signed, sealed, and ready, because once those engines start, the stakes go way up. But paperwork and protocols are just the surface. What most passengers never realize is that while they're dozing off mid-flight or watching a movie at 2 a.m., there's a hidden door somewhere on that plane, and behind it, a secret room. On long-haul flights, especially international ones, many aircraft are equipped with private crew rest compartments. They're tucked away in places you'd never think to look, above the cabin ceiling, behind the cockpit, or near the tail section. These aren't just tiny benches. They're actual sleeping quarters, often with multiple beds, low lighting, and thick curtains for privacy. Flight attendants rotate shifts, so someone is always awake to serve passengers, while others rest in complete isolation from the chaos of the cabin. It's the airline's best-kept secret, an entire hidden level on the plane that most people will never see. And then there's the design of the plane itself. Every curve and angle exists for a reason. Take airplane windows, for example. They weren't always round. Back in the early days of commercial aviation, windows were square, and that design choice turned out to be a deadly mistake. The sharp corners couldn't handle the repeated pressure changes that planes endure during flight. Cracks would start to form at the corners, weakening the structure until, catastrophically, they shattered. Several deadly crashes were traced back to those square windows, and engineers learned the hard way that curved shapes distribute pressure far more evenly. The round windows you see today aren't just a sleek design feature. They're a result of decades of tragedy and trial and error, quietly keeping passengers safe every time they fly. Still, even with stronger windows and secret rest areas, planes fly into danger every day. Literally. Commercial jets are hit by lightning more often than you'd think. On average, once a year per plane, or roughly once every 1,000 flight hours. But what's even more shocking? Sometimes the plane triggers the lightning. As an aircraft moves through a charged storm cloud, the friction between the fuselage and the surrounding air can generate enough static electricity to ignite a bolt. But here's the good news. Planes are designed for it. The electric charge travels harmlessly along the metal skin of the aircraft and exits through static wicks on the wings. You might see a flash or hear a bang, but inside the cabin, you're completely safe. No panic, no emergency landings, just another quiet moment where a massive, violent force of nature passes over without you even realizing it. And next time you're buckling in, now you'll know. Every click, every color, every chime has a purpose. Flying may feel routine, but behind every smooth takeoff and gentle landing are layers of secrets, systems, and silent protections. Some are comforting, others are unsettling, but all of them remind you that when it comes to air travel, what you don't see is just as important as what you do. And just when you think you've seen it all, from lightning strikes to secret sleeping quarters, there's one more layer of mystery hiding in plain sight. The everyday details you touch, sit on, and lean against. Because the dirtiest parts of the plane aren't locked behind any hidden door, they're right where you are. Most people assume the bathroom is the worst offender when it comes to germs, but that's not even close. In reality, it's the headrest, the seatbelt buckle, the tray table, and the seat pocket that harbor the highest concentrations of bacteria, mold, and yeast. One study found that nearly a third of seatbelts tested contained detectable mold spores. Tray tables, often used for eating, writing, or resting your phone, are rarely disinfected between flights and are touched by hundreds of passengers a day. And those seat pockets? They're not cleaned at all. Used tissues, snack wrappers, and even dirty diapers have been found stuffed inside them. It's a grim truth airlines don't advertise, because the logistics of fully sanitizing every touchpoint between tight flight schedules are nearly impossible. The cleaning crews have minutes to turn the plane around, and that means your area is probably only getting a quick wipe, if that. That pristine-looking seat might be holding onto the germs of a dozen strangers before you. So, what can you do? Bring sanitizing wipes. Disinfect your tray, your belt buckle, and especially your headrest before you get comfortable. Most people don't think twice about leaning back and closing their eyes, but once you know what's really living on those surfaces, it's hard to unsee it. Even the simplest habits, like slipping something into the seat pocket, could be exposing you to bacteria left behind by someone hours earlier on a completely different flight. It's not paranoia, it's just the reality of mass air travel. Because in the race to keep flights on time, cleanliness often takes a back seat, and when you're sealed inside a pressurized cabin with limited airflow, every shared surface matters a lot more than you think. So while the engines hum and the lights dim, the real danger might not be in the sky outside, but in the space you've just settled into for the next several hours. And while you're sitting in that less than sterile space, drifting off or watching, the seatbelt sign flicker. There's one last twist to the flying experience that most passengers never realize. Sometimes, the calmest moments of the flight are actually the most tightly choreographed. When you hear the captain's voice crackle through the speaker saying they're just finishing up some paperwork, it sounds routine, almost boring. But what they're really doing is wrapping up critical pre-departure checks, confirming the flight log, and coordinating final clearance from air traffic control. That paperwork includes detailed records of fuel load, maintenance status, route adjustments, and safety confirmations. Until every box is checked, the aircraft doesn't leave the gate. It's a final silent checkpoint in a chain of invisible safety nets you never see, and it's non-negotiable. But that's not the only thing happening behind the scenes. On long-haul flights, when most of the cabin is asleep and the aisle lights are dimmed, there's a part of the plane only the crew gets to experience, one that's hidden from view by design. Above the main cabin, or tucked deep into the tail, there are private crew rest compartments, accessible only by a disguised staircase or panel. These are tiny soundproofed rooms with low ceilings and narrow beds where flight attendants and sometimes even pilots go to sleep in shifts. It's not a luxury, it's essential. Fatigue is a serious risk on international routes, and federal aviation laws require minimum rest periods for crew. These secret quarters ensure that the team looking after you gets enough downtime to stay alert and responsive, even if you never realized they were gone. And it's not just sleeping arrangements that reflect decades of trial and error. Look at the shape of the windows beside you. In the early days of commercial aviation, airplane windows were square, just like the ones in your home. But those sharp corners created pressure points that led to catastrophic structural failures at high altitudes. In one tragic stretch of aviation history, multiple crashes were traced directly to square window designs. The solution? Curved windows. Rounded edges distribute the stress of pressurized cabins far more evenly, reducing the risk of cracks and structural failure. So the next time you rest your head against that little porthole to catch a glimpse of the clouds, remember, it's curved not just for aesthetics, but because people once paid with their lives for those lessons in design. Even with all these changes and safety features, planes still fly directly into one of nature's most dramatic forces, lightning. And it happens more than most people imagine. On average, every commercial plane is struck by lightning at least once a year. Sometimes the plane doesn't just get hit, it causes the strike, as it slices through electrically charged storm. Clouds. The friction from the fuselage can generate enough static electricity to ignite a bolt of lightning that wouldn't have existed otherwise. But here's the part that defies logic. You're perfectly safe. The aircraft's aluminum skin is designed to conduct the electrical charge along the outside of the plane and safely discharge it through tiny rods called static wicks, usually located on the wings and tail. Inside the cabin, you might see a flash or hear a loud boom, but the systems are built to keep the passengers unaware, unaffected, and untouched by the power raging just outside the window. It's easy to think of air travel as routine. The same boarding announcements, the same snacks, the same destination map glowing above the seats. But the truth is, every single flight is a carefully managed puzzle of engineering, psychology, safety, and human behavior. And the more you uncover about what's really happening around you, the more you realize that flying isn't just about getting from point A to point B. It's about trusting an enormous, invisible network of people, machines, and split-second decisions, most of which you'll never see. But now, at least, you'll know they're there, and just when you think you've uncovered all the secrets cruising behind the cabin curtain, there's one last element of flying that quietly ties everything together: the fact that despite all this chaos, coordination, and invisible complexity, air travel remains one of the safest ways to move through the world. That safety isn't accidental. It's engineered into every inch of the aircraft, down to details you'd never think twice about. Take lightning strikes. They sound terrifying, and they are, if you're imagining them hitting anything else on Earth. But airplanes are uniquely built for it. The metal body of the plane acts like a Faraday cage, meaning the electric current from a lightning strike travels along the surface of the aircraft, never penetrating the inside. That sudden flash you might see through the window, it's over, before the crew even makes a single announcement. And while it's unsettling to imagine, the average plane gets struck about once per year, not because of bad luck, because it's just part of flying. Even more surprising, planes don't always wait for lightning to find them. Sometimes they cause it. Flying through highly charged storm clouds, the aircraft itself can become the final trigger that sparks a bolt of electricity across the sky. It's not magic, it's just physics, and the aircraft handles it without so much as a flicker in the cabin lights. But maybe the most unbelievable part of it all? How little passengers truly notice. As you buckle in, unwrap your earbuds, and scroll through the in-flight entertainment, you're surrounded by layers of invisible systems, technologies, and protocols working constantly in the background, quietly shaping every moment of the flight. You don't see the autopilot adjusting speed to match invisible air currents. You don't hear the data stream linking your aircraft to satellites and control towers around the globe. And you certainly don't realize that at any given second, there are at least a dozen redundancies in place, ready to catch any single thing that goes wrong. Flying feels normal now, but it's anything but ordinary. Every tiny piece, from the color of your seat to the ding of the chime to the taste of your lunch, is part of an experience that's been studied, tested, and carefully refined to be just predictable enough that you don't question it. But now that you know what really goes on up there, the next time you step on a plane, you'll notice things. You'll notice the quiet patterns, the hidden designs, the safety steps disguised as routine. You'll see how much is happening without a word being said. And maybe, just maybe, that calm you feel at 35,000 feet will come not from ignorance, but from understanding. And while all of that, the lightning, the engineering, the calm control, feels like the climax of the story, there's still one final piece of the puzzle that might just change the way you look at flying forever. Because when you step onto a plane, you're not just stepping into a metal tube built for travel. You're entering a system designed with layers of logic that aren't always about comfort, but about survival. Take engine failure, for example. It sounds like the nightmare scenario. Both engines go out mid-flight and panic sets in. But here's what most passengers never realize. Planes are designed to glide. If all engines fail, whether from fuel issues, bird strikes, or extreme weather, the aircraft doesn't just fall out of the sky. It can stay airborne for up to 20 minutes, silently cutting through the air like a massive metal glider. That's more than enough time for trained pilots to assess the situation, communicate with air traffic control, and guide the aircraft to the safest possible landing. There have been real-life examples of this. Planes landing on rivers, abandoned runways, even grassy fields. And they didn't crash because of luck. They landed because of training, planning, and aircraft design that prepares for the worst long before passengers ever sense a problem. The systems are built with such redundancy that even if communication is lost or an unexpected failure occurs, there's a procedure. There's always a plan B, and usually a plan C and D waiting behind it. Pilots rehearse scenarios like this in simulators over and over again, from engine loss at takeoff to sudden decompression at altitude. It's their job to stay calm when no one else can. And most of the time, passengers never even know just how close things came to going sideways. Because the true sign of a successful flight isn't just a smooth landing, it's that the passengers felt nothing out of the ordinary, while extraordinary things were happening around them. So the next time you're buckling in and glancing out that curved window, understand that you're surrounded by more than seats and strangers. You're inside one of the most sophisticated machines humans have ever built, maintained, monitored, and managed by people trained to solve life or death problems while making it all look effortless. Flying isn't just safe because it has to be. It's safe because behind every click of your belt and every ding in the cabin, there's an entire universe of intention, silent, seamless, and almost invisible until you know where to look.